tried out and talked about some cradle-to-cradle products on fair companies, but they right now seem pretty limited. How far do you see this going, and how long do you think it'll take?
It's going to take, you know, one of the things about sustainability is that it's going to take forever. That's the point. So I think we're going to see a long, hard road of product by product by product. But that's how revolutions happen. It's one thing at a time, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you fall down and you get back up and you do it again.
There were a couple images that remind me of Taliesin West. I'd like to ask you if you got some inspiration from right. Also, I would like to share the fact that I live in the United States, and then you always get into the world of the politics, and then it's quite a challenge. How can you manage that?
Jane Jacobs, who was an urban theorist, wrote The Life and Death of the Great American Cities. She wrote a book called Systems of Survival. And in that book she said humans have evolved two syndromes of survival, the guardian and commerce. So it's the state and business. The two have to be kept separate, because if you get the two together, you get trouble, like the mafia, because the guardian is very slow, it's very serious, it reserves the right to kill, it reserves the right to regulate. Business is very quick, it's very efficient, it's very effective, highly creative. If you get the two together, you get what she calls a monstrous hybrid. And it'd be like the mafia, it does business but reserves the right to kill. It's a problem. So you keep the two separate. So one of the things Cradle to Cradle is trying to do is keep these two things separate, because what we see is that a regulation is a signal of design failure. If you see a regulation, then there's something wrong with the design. Because if the state has to step in and say, wait a minute, you're releasing cadmium into our water, then there's something wrong with that design, that it's releasing cadmium into the water. And so we see it as an opportunity for new design. Well, what's wonderful about Cradle to Cradle is that if you design with Cradle to Cradle, you find out that you don't need to be regulated. And so the politics start to move away, because your business can get on with its business without worrying about the regulators, because the regulators aren't worried about you. We find that to be a very powerful tool in the relationship with the politics of the change that we're looking at, because we keep it separated from the commerce, because there's nothing to regulate. We find that, and it's really useful. One of the biggest questions that happens with us in our work is people say, well, is it more expensive? That's the first question. It's always the first question. And is this a cost, because you're adding this to the regular costs? And what we found is it's usually cheaper to do this. That fabric you saw for the Airbus 380 is 20% cheaper after we went through the cradle-to-cradle protocol, because the company no longer has to handle hazardous materials. It no longer has to pay its workers, and they complained about this, believe it or not. The workers no longer have to handle cancer materials. So they used to get a bonus for handling materials that cause cancer. Now they don't get the bonus for handling cancer materials, but so it goes. But anyway, it ended up being 20% cheaper to make. The Ford project, over conventional engineering, saved $35 million on the first day. And with the Ford cars at a 4% margin out of Chicago, that's the equivalent of an order for $900 million worth of cars. So these are very effective strategies once they're put into play. But we didn't do the Ford Green Roof to purify the stormwater because of a regulation, because the government told us to do it. The government simply said we want clean water. And we figured out how to do it with ecological engineering. It was business that figured out how to deliver the solution. Yeah.
What is your thought about death?
About what?
Death. The fact that you have to die.
Right.
And you, in a certain sense, already replied by saying that the waste is life, right?
Right.
Isn't your way of thinking also a way for us all to accept the fact that we have a limited time?
Yeah. It is funny. Somebody once said to Michael Braungart, when he was describing Cradle to Cradle, that essentially it was like redesigning the industrial system from the perspective of a Hindu. because we believe in reincarnation. And because Michael pointed out that in the northern countries, we don't have the picture that Ignatius showed you of the two of us we were in Iceland, and if you go to a place like Iceland, if you peel a banana and you put a banana skin on a rock, you can come back the next year and it's still there because things don't rot. And so in the northern climates where industrialization was in many respects spurred, there's a tendency to want to bury everything because it doesn't decompose, it doesn't return to the soil quickly because of the climate. And so there's this tendency to bury everything, including our emotions and things like that. So I think that the Cradle to Cradle really is an idea about reincarnation of things over time. So it's really much more like a Buddhist or Hindu strategy than it is a Western strategy.